Hello everyone, we are D&D Breakfast Club. We wanted to invite you to our table today to talk about everything D&D 5th edition related. Today we're going to be talking about fantastical familiars and where you can find them. So we wanted to start off this discussion letting you know that, first of all, this is a variant rule. It's definitely got a little bit of homebrew in it. Not every DM is going to let you pick different familiars for your caster, especially because warlocks, the Pact of the Chain warlock? That's what you play, right? You have some Pact of the Chain levels. They get a special familiar. And if they're going to be in your campaign, then this would actually just be stepping on their toes, take away one of their main features, which is I get a better familiar than most people can get. However, if you're running a campaign that isn't playing with one of those characters, or if you're doing a campaign, like Josh ran us through a campaign where it was a Wizard's Academy, and we all got to pick different familiars to whatever he allowed us to have. But the discussion starts here in Volo's Guide to Monsters. It's called Variant Familiars, and it's on page 213. Any spellcaster that can cast the Find Familiar spell, such as an apprentice, warlock, or wizard, is likely to have a familiar. It can be one of the creatures described in the spell in the player's handbook, or it can be some other tiny monster, such as a cranium rat, a crawling claw, a gazer, an imp, a pseudo dragon, or a quasi. And those are just some of the examples. There's some adventure modules out there that they also say you can get this kind of creature. And someone's made a compendium, slapped them all together, and said these are all the different kind of familiars you can pick. So we're going to talk about the different kind of familiars we think are the best and why. And I'm going to kind of give you some reference as a DM of how I would allow it in my campaign. Let's go ahead and start with you, Josh. Let's start with the Find Familiar spell.
Okay, all right. So the original spell, before we start throwing in all these variant rules and stuff, says its casting time is 1 hour, its range is 10 feet, components, verbal, somatic, material, and it takes 10 gold points, basically, worth of charcoal, incense, and herbs that are consumed by fire. So you gain the service of a familiar, a spirit that takes an animal form you choose, and it's a very specific list in the original spell. Bat, cat, crab, frog, toad, hawk, lizard, octopus, owl, poisonous snake, fish, as in the quipper, rat, raven, seahorse, spider, or weasel. Appearing in an unoccupied space within range, the familiar has the statistics of the chosen form, though it's actually a celestial, fey, or fiend, your choice, instead of a beast. Your familiar acts independently of you, but it always obeys your commands. In combat, it rolls its own initiative and acts on its own turn. A familiar can attack, but it can take other actions as normal. When the familiar drops to 0 hit points, it disappears, leaving behind no physical form. It reappears after you cast the spell again. While your familiar is within 100 feet of you, you can communicate with it telepathically. Additionally, as an action, you can see through your familiar's eyes and hear what it hears until the start of your next turn, gaining the benefits of any special senses that the familiar has. During this time, you are deaf and blind with regard to your senses. As an action, you can temporarily dismiss your familiar. It disappears into a pocket dimension where it awaits your summons. Alternatively, you can dismiss it forever. As an action, while it is temporarily dismissed, you can cause it to reappear in any unoccupied space within 30 feet of you. You can't have more than one familiar at a time. If you cast the spell while you already have a familiar, you instead cause it to adopt a new form. Choose one of the forms from the list above. Your familiar transforms into the chosen creature. Finally, when you cast the spell with a range of touch, your familiar can deliver the spell as if it had cast the spell, which is kind of awesome. Your familiar must be within 100 feet of you, and it must use its reaction to deliver the spell when you cast it. If the spell requires an attack roll, you use your attack modifier for the roll.
Ooh,
yeah, it's a chunky spell.
There was a part in there that actually, it literally says, choose its form from the list above.
Yep, when you switch it to a different form, when you have it adopt a new form.
Yeah, so most of the ruling's going to say stick to these familiars, a normal game. But we're going to go over some of the more unique choices you can pick.
My favorite familiar's got to be the Tressym. It's a tiny beast.
What is a Tressym?
A Tressym is basically a winged cat. So think a cat with wings, but they're a little bit different. They've got a speed of 40 feet. They have a climb speed, which is kind of cool, of 30 feet, and a fly speed of 40 feet. And they're smart, right? So they have an intelligence of 11, which is smarter than the current character that I play in the game. They have dark vision up to 60 feet, perception +5, stealth +4. They're immune to poison and immune to being poisoned. And here's the cool part. They understand common, right? They can't speak, but they know what you're saying to them. So you don't always have to be like, whoa, 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 and telepathically communicate. You just be like, hey, Rodney, go over there and see if, Jimmy's in the pot because I have to use the bathroom. And they'll pretty much understand what you're saying.
It's a pretty good quest.
I mean, I don't know. For a familiar, they're not super beefy, right? Other things they can do, they can detect invisibility. Within 60 feet, magical invisibility fails to conceal anything from the Tressym. They have advantage on wisdom perception checks that rely on smell, and they can detect whether a substance is poisonous by taste, touch, or smell. So they just do a lot of really neat kind of little things for a creature that has a challenge rating of 0. I think they're actually kind of amazing and possibly the best familiar.
I would say, as the DM, to have this kind of familiar in campaign at level 1 would probably be too powerful.
Because they're awesome.
They are really awesome. If you were to allow this in your own game, I would think this is probably not a tier 1 creature. If we're going to put these guys into tiers, I would put them into more of a tier 2 type of familiar. Something like over level 5, you could probably get something like this without it being too powerful.
Sure.
And I don't think I would just give it to you. I'd probably have you quest for it.
On an epic quest.
It actually comes from, it's a quest reward in the Storm King's Thunder book.
Oh, really?
In that adventure route. That's where you unlock the ability to get this. It's not really one that you can just snap your fingers and have access to immediately.
Damn it.
Well, I didn't know that. What level is Storm Kings? Is that 6 to 10?
Storm Kings? I don't remember exactly. I read through it once, but I don't recall.
It's mid tier. Storm Kings is not an early level campaign module.
6 to 10.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
So then that's right about where I would put it on power level. Mm-hmm. It's not a good low power level creature. I mean, it's a great low level power creature, but too
That's
great.
why. Yeah.
If you can overpower your players, your familiar is probably... When your familiar is actually the PC and your character is its familiar,
right?
It could be a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pull us back to lower level power level. And I'm going to pick something that I wouldn't mind giving someone at level 1. And I'm going to pick the Cranium rats. Let me pull these guys up and we can talk about them. They're a little better than a rat, obviously, because they're Cranium rats. They are AC of 12. They have 2 hit points, not 1. I think rats have just 1.
Twice as hefty as your normal rat.
Exactly. The one thing they have that is a little better than the rat is their illumination effect. They shed dim light from their brain in a 5-foot radius.
Which is kind of awesome.
There's not a ton of good uses, I'm going to be honest, with this ability. They can light the way a little. They could cause a distraction, maybe. They could get someone's attention.
They could be your nightlight if your wizard's afraid of the dark.
They can be your nightlight. But they're cooler than rats. I mean, unless you want just your basic run-of-the-mill rat, pick this guy.
Twice as tough.
They're also immune to any effect that would sense their emotions or read their thoughts, although I don't think familiars are actually affected by that because maybe they are. That's another discussion because Find Familiar is a very complicated spell. That's probably the one thing we've learned with that spell is it's got so many components going on, as you could tell by how long the spell is. It's like 4 paragraphs. Cranium Rat. Level 1, I wouldn't have a problem with that as a DM. So you can find Cranium Rats on Volo's Guide, page 133. Well, we hear from you, Brian.
All right, going back off the beaten trail is a familiar that I got to play with one time when we were playing an all-wizard campaign, and that is the Boggle, which can be found on page 128 of Volo's Guide to Monsters. And there's a couple good things and bad things going for this one. So first thing you might notice is that it's a small fey creature, which means if you're playing a gnome or a halfling, it's your weird shadow twin. It can be your side.
I think we made yours a runt, though.
Yeah, you downsized mine by one size category just
You
because
made
we
it-
actually did have a halfling in that campaign.
You made it tiny.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we made it to a tiny creature.
What page is that on?
128.
I want to see it.
Yeah, I just said his was like runty or something.
Mm-hmm. But it's a small, obnoxious creature, and that's really where it kind of balances out the power, because otherwise it could be a bit overpowering. But it says right in its description that it is has a feature called Unreliable Allies. A Boggle makes a decent servant for a strong-willed master, and wicked creatures such as Fomorians and hags sometimes shelter Boggles in their lairs. Warlocks who form pacts with Archfey also have been known to command Boggles, and charismatic individuals who make the right offers have enjoyed temporary alliances with these little tricksters. But a bored Boggle always finds some way to entertain itself. And as a subset to that, Boggles engage in petty pranks to amuse themselves, passing the time at their host's expense. A Boggle isn't above breaking dishes, hiding tools, making frightening sounds to startle cows and sour their milk, or hiding a baby in an attic. Although a Boggle's antics might cause distress and unintentional harm or mischief, no, it is mischief and not mayhem that is usually its intent. If threatened, a Boggle flees rather than stands and fights. So you have to, one, have some serious rapport with this creature. You do not mistreat it. You do not send it into anything that will cause it to betray you. But if it's friendly with you, it has some neat perks. Like it's just excretes oil from its skin, which is either slippery or sticky.
Crazy mucus.
Disgusting.
How's that a perk?
Well, it can smear itself all over the hallway, which means the next guy that comes through either slips and falls or gets stuck.
And it sounds like that's right up their alley.
You can use them to
Absolutely.
make mischief, basically.
Mm-hmm. And then, last but not least, it creates some dimensional rifts. So anytime it finds a door or a window, it can create a rift that can blink it across barriers throughout castles. It can't really be bound. So it is. The first line is that the Boggles are the little bogies of fairy tales. So in its description, this is a little gremlin, a tiny monster that you can sort of have on your side. It's like a goofy poltergeist, I suppose, but it's only a little bit on your side. It sticks around just because that's what amuses it.
Yeah, and because it might think you're interesting.
Mm-hmm. So if you're looking to maximize your potential output, this is not the way to go. If you're looking for something fun to disrupt or maybe be the comedic relief, it could certainly hold its own in that category. But if you really need a familiar to just obey your commands and go do that thing to save your life,
Not the Boggle.
the Boggle will be a bad choice for you.
It might let you go through its slippery fingers.
Mhm.
So I've looked at the spell. Not even a spell. It's an ability. Slippery oil and sticky oil. It looks like there's no limit.
No, it just does it. And it can't, as far as I can tell, it can't even turn it off. It's just always either oozing oil or sticky.
Okay, so it's oozing it more than it's actually like laying down a layer.
Yeah,
of
it's
it.
not like
It excretes non-flammable oil from its pores, and the Boggle chooses whether the oil is slippery or sticky.
Okay,
and can
so
change-
it's more. It's personal.
Yep.
It's
can
like
slip
he
out of your
blows his
grip.
nose out of his skin.
Okay. The dimensional rift is pretty handy. I would rate this a tier 2, right along with your Tressym. It's not super powerful. Tons of role play in there. So many things could be messed up with this little guy.
Yeah. The easiest way to keep its power level in check is just to have it not be available because it's off doing other things.
Right. So, hey, where's my familiar? I don't know.
It's also small. Most familiars are within that tiny category. So when you bumped his down to tiny, it made a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'd still rate it at about a power level 2.
So this next one is a pseudo dragon, which
Shiny
actually
familiar. Warning.
So this one is powerful enough they actually made it a playable class in Unearthed Arcana.
Really?
Yep.
Oh.
Holy crap. I was not aware of that.
So if your DM does not give you the option to do this, you can still get the familiar through warlock, because it specifically calls out you can have an imp, pseudo dragon, or
Sprite.
So
or
the
closet.
Pact of the Chain
Yeah.
Warlock can
Pact of
get
the
a
Chain
pseudo
Warlock.
dragon.
So yeah, even if you're like, well, my DM's not allowing it for my wizard, you can still do a warlock and
Just
still get
multi
it.
for 2 levels. I mean, whatever.
That too. So
3.
Is it 3? Okay.
the pseudo dragon has keen senses, and you can share its senses. So it could be up to DM discretion, because they have advantage on perception checks that rely on sight, hearing, or smell. So if seeing through their eyes, you could have advantage on that if that counts. They also have blind sight 10 feet, dark vision 60 feet.
Blind sight's really good.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
you just
it's
know something's within that 10 feet, no matter what. In fact, invisible or hiding creatures can't hide from your blind sight.
Right.
yeah. So you can put them on your
Interesting
shoulder,
note.
put them on your shoulder, and perceive through their through their senses, and just walk around with blind sight 10 feet and dark vision 60 feet, even if you're a human.
You could send them up ahead to scout for invisible things.
Yep.
If you want them to die.
So another thing is magic resistance. The pseudo dragon has advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects.
Less death.
All spells, all magical effects.
Yeah.
So
That's a neat perk. I've noticed that it comes down to another variant rule. So you can either cast Find Familiar, and you get that little spirit ball of light that can take whatever shape you choose.
Right.
Or, especially as a Pact of the Chain, occasionally you can capture an actual creature, like an actual imp,
And like
or an
bind it to
actual
your
pseudo
will.
dragon. And those often have that magic resistance. But I don't believe most DMs will rule that your little speck of light, your ethereal creature that's taking a form of a badger or a snake, suddenly gains magic resistance when it's in this shape.
they also
fair.
have limited telepathy. They can communicate magically within 100 feet of it, if
With
you
any
understand language.
creature. That's not bad. So it's not just the caster.
And I did find some stuff, although this is probably less likely to make it in the game. There are some interesting variants that I found where it has a variant familiar for Pseudo Dragon. Pseudo Dragon can serve another creature as a familiar, forming a magic telepathic bond with that willing companion. While the two are bonded, the companion senses what the Pseudo Dragon senses, as long as they're within 1 mile of each other. While the Pseudo Dragon is within 10 feet of its companion, the companion shares the Pseudo Dragon's magical resistance trait.
Yep. So that would be if you actually have the real creature.
Yep.
Right.
If you have the real creature, can it use its attacks?
Not unless you're chain lock.
Okay.
Yeah. Wizard familiars cannot attack.
Because there's the Find Familiar spell.
Mhm.
And then if you're not using that, you can gain a companion, you can gain a familiar, you can gain all these other things just through role playing. So even if you are a barbarian, you can go out and get a dire wolf that loves you and stays with you. It takes a lot of work. It's probably not going to be easy. And if it dies, it's actually dead. But there's a lot of other ways around getting these companions and sidekicks, whatever version you want to call them.
And also, if you are a warlock, you can do the have the familiar attack,
Mhm.
and the Pseudo Dragon has a sting that can poison for 1 hour.
Ooh, that's
Is it
awesome.
poison damage or just poison?
The target must succeed on a DC 11 Constitution saving throw or become poisoned for 1 hour.
11's
If
not
the
high.
saving throw fails by 5 or more?
The target falls unconscious for the same duration.
What?
Wow.
I would totally have my pseudo dragon pissing in everybody's ale at the bar.
So you have a Pact of the Chain Warlock. You did not pick Pseudo Dragon.
I've got an imp, which has some nice things.
It
going
has
on,
its
but
own perks, but man, Pseudo Dragon, that would have been a good choice too.
Hmm.
I would rate this probably also a tier 2. If it can't attack and it can't use its sting because you're not a Pact of the Chain Warlock, it has a lot of good things going for it, but I don't think it's overpowered to the point where...
I don't know.
What's leaning you more towards a tier 3? A tier 3 to me is like level 11 plus.
I mean, the shared magic resistance is pretty intense.
Amazing, right? And like, if we're putting it up against the Tressyms or the Boggle, it's obviously better. In fact, there is a whole subclass of a class that gets to pick this guy as a familiar because that's the awesomeness.
Do
right?
you share its magic resistance?
That's what it says. If
That was
you're
one of the
familiar-
variants.
There's a variant that
was a
says that you share a magical resistance with it if it's
when you
within
have
10
the
feet
real
of you.
thing.
That's
The
how
real
it works if you're the chain lock.
But this is not the chain
Most of the
lock.
time.
This is the sorcerer casting fine
I mean,
familiar.
so I would definitely take some stuff away from it if I was if I was DMing and it was a tier 2.
I would just say
put
if
it
it's
as
a tier 2,
3.
the magic resistance is its own. That's how I would probably just say. Everything else is kind of in line with just a good familiar.
The issue is if it does give you the magic resistance, it only has 7 hit points. So you can easily, if somebody hits it with a fireball, it'll
that's
still
any
toast
familiar.
it. Yeah.
That's familiars in general.
But if you wanted to get out of the magical resistance, it's like, oh, this person has magical resistance. Now they don't.
If it shared your magical resistance,
If it did.
then I would rate it as a tier 3.
Abjuration wizards get it super later on.
You
too.
took it away from Tia before I even got her. So
See?
I knew better.
Yeah, you stripped it. Yeah.
Now, is that how it's supposed to be for the Pact of the Chain Warlock? Were you
if you have the
supposed to
real,
it?
if you
You're
have
supposed to get it. Yeah.
the actual captured,
Oh,
which
because
is
you wanted a captured imp.
mhm.
And I was like, well, that would be a little too powerful to have the magic resistance shared at your level. We can talk about it.
I mean,
I'm going to bring her back from hanging out in the Citadel if that's the case.
yeah.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah,
And
you
cut
guys
that
are
out.
so smart. The variants, right? Can we bring it back to not variants?
Sure.
You can
Can
bring
we
it
talk-
back.
That's good old fashioned OP.
Can we just talk about
OP.
the best familiar, which is the owl?
Well, why don't you tell us
Harry
about
Potter
it?
knows why.
Exactly, because it's not. They're all in the Harry Potter movies, and that's why it's the best. No, just kidding. All right, so the owl, it's got a couple traits. The first one is flyby, so the owl doesn't provoke opportunity attacks when it flies near an enemy's reach, which is pretty useful, right?
I think the first half of that word, even fly, the fact that it can fly is what sets it apart from 3/4 of the possible familiars
Exactly.
already.
Toad or the rat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Correct.
think you know all about trying to get out of someone's reach when they're attacking you and provoking attacks of opportunity. The owl
Someone.
doesn't.
Someone's provoking right now.
Someone's provoking the attack about
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yep, I'll take that one. Okay, so the man, I'm really sad about it tonight right now. All right.
For those of you that don't know, and depending on when this plays, Garavan's character in real life, IRL,
Spoilers.
just died an ugly, grisly, fucked up death to another one of his one-off characters.
And it was my first one, so it's dead. Anyway, so another one of its traits is the owl has advantage on wisdom perception checks that rely on hearing or sight.
And
pretty
most
handy.
familiars actually only have one of those, if they have any at all. So to have
Right.
2 is pretty good.
A lot of them only have it on smelling.
Yep. I think some of the other birds of prey might have sight, but that's it.
Yeah.
So
And it has a pretty extensive dark vision, too. 120 feet, I believe.
Yep,
superior dark vision. Yeah, I mean, it is
It is
arguably the best vanilla familiar.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is no matter what your DM wants you to have, if they want just base player handbook, you can do an owl.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's in the spell.
That's why all of the Hogwarts students had owls, except for Dumbledore, and he had like a level 2 or 3 tier familiar. He had the
Yeah, the
whatever.
Phoenix, right?
Yeah, the Phoenix.
Neville had a toad.
Sorry,
But-
Neville.
Oh yeah, you did.
And Hermione had a cat.
Yeah,
Really?
not a Tressyms.
Ron had a toad, dude. Too,
They
didn't
have
he?
owls for
Yeah,
their.
Oh, that's right.
you know,
a
so
rat.
correspondence.
That's right.
Almost nobody had owls.
Really?
Harry
I don't know
had
what
an
you're
owl.
talking about.
So base spell, owl. If you read through
It's
all
good.
the different familiars, which I did in preparation for this,
Mhm.
there's not really any good choices.
Owl. Owl's the best.
You have owl,
Yeah.
and then after that, you have things like maybe a rat because it can squeeze through small spaces.
After Owl, you're really getting into just your role play options.
Yeah.
If you want something that's like I said, a badger because it fits your character for whatever reason, you can justify it. But really, if you're going to even approach optimization, it's an owl. Potentially a hawk if you want to go to another scouting option, but there's a pretty big gap.
In the water, there's octopus.
If you need a water familiar, the other good thing about Find Familiar is even if you have an owl, well, you can still just switch
Make
it
it an
to an
octopus.
octopus later if you need a water creature.
Although, I really gotta say, I don't like that. Like,
Yep.
I really like fixed familiars. I liked that about previous editions of D&D. Like, you got a familiar, and that was your familiar.
I know our campaign, we do, if it's, negligible gold cost, that we don't even count it. However, in the rules, it does say it does consume 10 gold
points
to switch from
stuff.
a different familiar.
Thank you all for joining us. Why don't you let us know what kind of familiar you'd pick and where you can find it down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you guys next week.